Before setting their bonds to $500,000 cash each, Judge Akers said she has never seen an indictment quite like this, and that not only alleges the trafficked black children, adopting them from shelters and foster care, forcing them to work, but that they specifically targeted them because of their race. Jeanne Whitefeather and Donald Lance came in on their own for their arraignments, but left in cuffs after Judge Mary Claire Akers set their bonds at $500,000, more than double what they had already paid.
And I don't think I've ever seen an indictment like this in all of my time. It alleges human trafficking, human rights violations, the use of forced labor, human rights violations specific to the fact that these children were targeted because of their race, and their use as basically slaves from what the indictment alleges, along with human trafficking and neglect with serious risk of bodily injury or death. I don't find the bond to be sufficient.
Today, we're discussing a heartbreaking and disturbing case from Sissonville, West Virginia. This case highlights how deep racism runs in our country, and it still shocks us to see stories like this. Jeanne Whitefeather and Donald Lance, a white couple, are accused of treating their 5 adopted children like slaves. According to the indictment, 3 of the children are black and were specifically targeted and adopted because of their race. The couple was arrested last fall after a wellness check revealed the terrible living conditions of the children. The conditions these children lived in were appalling. 2 of the children, aged 14 and 16, were found living in a barn outside the home. Neighbors tipped off law enforcement, leading deputies to discover the barn's limited resources. The teens had only a small porta potty, no running water, and no mattress. According to neighbors, the children were not allowed inside the main house and had to do farm labor outside instead. Whitefeather denies the allegations, claiming the barn was just a teenage clubhouse. Donald Ray Lance, 63, and Jeanne K. Whitefeather, 62, were recently brought back into custody after new charges were filed against them. They were initially arrested in October last year. The charges include human trafficking of a minor child, use of a minor child in forced labor, and child neglect creating a substantial risk of serious bodily injury or death. The couple sold their Sissonville home where they were arrested for $295,000 after their initial arrest. They also sold their 80-acre Washington State ranch for $725,000. This sale has raised questions about the couple's financial dealings and the use of these funds. Prosecutors are investigating if the children were forced into labor to pay for these properties. Their bond was increased from $200,000 to $500,000 each due to the severity of the allegations. Prosecutors argue that their previous bond was obtained through illicit means, possibly from profits made through trafficking. The couple's money is currently held by the Kanawha County Circuit Court Clerk's office, and there are calls to transfer it to a trust fund for the children. Both Whitefeather and Lance are now behind bars, awaiting their trial on September 9th.
Adoptive parents of 3 children are in jail today after Kanawha County deputies said 2 teens were found locked inside a barn. Hannah Klein breaks down the investigation after deputies say they received a 911 call from someone concerned about the kids.
A stunning find in Sissonville has led to the arrest of 2 adoptive parents.
You're being charged with a felony, child neglect, creating risk of injury.
Donald Lance and Jeanne Whitefeather now in jail as their children are now with CPS. It started on Monday when deputies got a call just before 6 o'clock in the evening. The 2 children were being locked in a barn at this home on Cheyenne Lane in Sissonville.
They weren't able to locate any guardians or parental figures or anybody around the residence or the barn, and started having a conversation with 2 children that were inside the barn.
Deputies eventually forced their way into the barn, where they said they found a 16-year-old girl and 14-year-old boy inside a 20 by 14-foot room. Investigators say the teens had no way to get out of the shed, with no running water, no bathroom. The girl told deputies their parents had brought them food around 6 o'clock that morning, but said her and her brother weren't allowed in the house and were locked in the barn for long periods every day. Eyewitness News spoke to neighbors who were afraid to go on camera, but claimed multiple families called police about the children's safety several times, and they are thankful they are now safe.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty bad case. I mean, it's you know, in any type of situation like this, it's not really comparable. A horrific condition, like, it's just not how you want or how you would even expect children to be raised or been taken care of.
Lance and Whitefeather eventually showed up at the home. They're now charged with child neglect, creating substantial risk of injury. The mother admitted the children were left in the shed, but reportedly told deputies they, quote, liked it.
They're trying to, get the children back in better living conditions, better placement, and the detectives will continue to investigate and build this case.
Jeanne Whitefeather and Donald Lance came in on their own for their arraignments, but left in cuffs after Judge Mary Claire Akers set their bonds at $500,000, more than double what they had already paid.
And I don't think I've ever seen an indictment like this in all of my time. It alleges human trafficking, human rights violations, the use of forced labor, human rights violations specific to the fact that these children were targeted because of their race, and their use as basically slaves from what the indictment alleges, along with human trafficking and neglect with serious risk of bodily injury or death. I don't find the bond to be sufficient. Counts 9 through 12 allege the use of forced labor, which I read as slavery.
And deputies said a third child who was about 5 or 6 years old was found alone in the main home. Now, the child was found crying and close to the railing of an approximately 15-foot drop from a loft.
Details on how the couple adopted these children are still emerging. The children's birth parents' whereabouts are currently unknown, and it's unclear what led to their adoption by Lance and Whitefeather. Investigations are ongoing to uncover the full story. At this time, it is not clear whether the children were homeschooled or attended public school. Given their isolated living conditions and forced labor, it seems likely they were not receiving a proper education. The local community in Sissonville is in shock and disbelief. Neighbors reported that the children were often seen performing labor on the farm and were not allowed inside the main house. The community is now coming together to support the children and ensure justice is served. The children are now under the care of Child Protective Services. Efforts are being made to ensure they receive the care and support they need to recover from this traumatic experience. Community members and organizations are rallying to provide assistance and ensure the children's safety and well-being. This case is a clear reminder of the importance of vigilance and community involvement in protecting our children. As the legal process continues, our thoughts are with the children affected by this tragedy. Thank you for watching. If you suspect any child is being abused or neglected, please contact your local authorities or Child Protective Services immediately. Together, we can make a difference.